Okay, Shabbat Shalom, good morning, and welcome to United Israel World Union. This is our Sabbath morning scripture study coming to you live from St. Francisville. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are in class number 24 in our series, The Pentateuch, A New Look. And today I plan to cover material for part 2 of a class that I began last week, a series within a series within a series, sort of like a wheel within a wheel. Stay tuned for that. It's called The Chest of the Testimony, The Chest of the Testimony. This is part 2. I have a lot of material to cover today, so without further ado, open your Bibles this morning to the prophet Ben Buzi, the prophet Ben Buzi, also known as Ezekiel, also known as Ezekiel. Ezekiel Chapter 1 and verse 1. Some of you thought you were on the wrong channel this morning. Ezekiel Chapter 1, verse 1. I have a lot of reading to do, but it's very important. It's part of the class. Now it came to pass in the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the river Kavar, that the heavens were open, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which is the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of Jehovah came to Ezekiel, Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of Kasdim by the river Kavar. And the hand of Jehovah was there upon him. And I looked, and behold, a storm wind came out of the north, a great cloud, a fire flaring up, and a brightness was about it. And out of the midst of it, as it were, the color of electrum, out of the midst of the fire, also out of the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. And this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Everyone had 4 faces. Everyone had 4 wings. Their feet were straight feet. The sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. They sparkled like the color of burnished brass, and they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. As for their faces and their wings of those 4, their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went every one straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, they had the face of a lion on the right-hand side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces, their wings were divided upwards. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. They went every one straight forward. Wherever the Spirit was minded to go, they went. They turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like coals of fire, burning like the appearance of torches. It flashed up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright. And out of the fire went forth lightning, and the living creatures ran and returned like the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures with his 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like the color of an emerald, and they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. And when they went toward their 4 sides. They turned not when they went, and as for their rims, they were so high that they were dreadful. Their rims were full of eyes round about them 4, and when the living creatures moved, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Wherever the Spirit was minded to go, they moved, for the Spirit was minded to go there. And the wheels were lifted up along with them, for the Spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When these moved, these moved. When those stood still, those stood still. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up along with them, for the Spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And over the heads of the living creatures there was the likeness of a firmament, an expanse like the color of terrible ice, stretched out over their heads above, and under the firmament their wings were held straight, the one toward the other. Every one had 2 which covered them, namely, every 2 which covered their body. And when they moved, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, like the voice of the Almighty, the noise of a tumult, Like the noise of a host. When they stood still, they let down their wings. And there was a voice from above the firmament that was up over their heads. When they stood still, they let down their wings. And above the expanse that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was a likeness as the appearance of a man upon it. And I saw something like the color of electrum, like the appearance of fire, round about enclosing it, from what appeared to be his loins upward, and from what appeared to be his loins downward. I saw what appeared to be fire. And there was brightness round about him, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard the voice of one that spoke. In Hebrew, what is translated as the living creatures is chayot. Chayot. You hear in that word the word chai, which means life. Now, the Hebrew is translated by Koren and other translations as living creatures. I'm going to propose a slightly different rendering. It's okay, but creature conjures up or pulls up a certain image in my mind, and I want to kind of put that aside. These are living beings, living things. Chayot is all we know them described as. There's not a name aside from Chayot which is given for these living things. Now, that's a pretty interesting description that I just read. By the way, there are warnings in certain circles that certain people shouldn't even study this. You know, you can really get pulled into this. It's quite interesting. The description of these beings, these living beings, is very elaborate, very detailed. And what we have here, it begins with Ezekiel, Yechezkel, the priest, the son of Buzi. Yechezkel ben Buzi is by the river Kevar, and he says that he has the Marot Elohim. The Marot Elohim, it's translated, I think, in the Koran, if I remember right, it was the visions of God. But we have another word for vision. Typically, the word vision is chazon. In this sense, Marot is what is seen, that which appears. So in a way, like in my notes this week, I wrote revelation. It's a revelation. It's what is seen by Ezekiel, not the Isle of Patmos revelation. This is a different revelation. This is the revelation of God given to the prophet and priest Ezekiel. It's what he has seen, and although some details are hard to follow, he clearly is trying to depict what it is that's in his eyes for us. And it's quite interesting. First off, the likeness of a man. Okay, these living beings, you know, if you're looking at it, you say, well, it's sort of the form of a man, but there are some differences, as you heard. What are those differences? Let's quickly go through this. By the way, remember, all we know these living beings as at this point is chayot. Now, I know people want to get ahead of me. Always just wait for me. Wait. They have the likeness of a man. The appearance of these living beings is that there's this aura, if you will, this appearance of a fire. Notice he says all the time, has the appearance of, has the likeness of, has the appearance of. He's trying to describe it, and when you say it, it's sort of like it's simile, all the way through. It's like this, it's like that. Meaning, what he sees is indescribable in its preciseness. He has to give you a simile to say, it's like a man, it's like the appearance of fire, you see, all right? Now, these living beings had 4 faces. Now, I want you, if you're taking notes, I want you to split your paper into two because you're going to need to put 4 on one side, and I'm going to give you 4 of something else to put on the other side. So on the left, I want you to write, these are the faces of the living beings, the chayot. There are 4 faces, the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. Now, what we don't know, we can assume, and many translations will do this for you, we assume by the listing that it begins in the front. So you have man, and then as you work around the head of this living being, you have man in the front, then you have lion, and then you go back to the other side. You go opposite, and you say ox on the left, and then in the back, eagle. But technically, could be eagle in the front, man in the back. All right? We just go with what it says. Now, they have 4 wings each. Remember, there are 4 of these living beings, 4 each with 4 faces, each with 4 wings. Now, the thing about the wings, we learn that 2 are joined together. It's difficult to understand what the Hebrew means here. Does it mean you have wing, and they're joined together, wing, they're joined together? 2 of these wings cover the body of this living being. 2 cover the body. Whenever the wings move, it's a really great noise. Great meaning big noise. It's the sound of a tumult, the sound of many great waters. It's compared by Ezekiel. It's like the voice of the Almighty. Now, underneath these wings, it says, according to Ezekiel, it says that they have the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. So that's kind of confusing too, right? So are there wings here and here? It's kind of difficult. We get the impression that there are only 4 wings. Each of the wings has a hand under the wings on their 4 sides. So I think that the Hebrew is saying that under each of the 4 wings there are hands. In other words, there are 4 hands. And the feet are straight feet. The soles of the feet, however, are the feet of a calf. Like, you think of a hoof, but it's talking about the sole of the foot. Well, what's the sole of the foot of the calf, right? So this is a very interesting being that we're talking about. And they sparkle. The Hebrew is, it's okay to translate it sparkle. It's associated with burnished brass in my translation here. In the Koran, it says burnished brass. And in the Hebrew, it's nechoshet. Nechoshet is brass. Like some translations will translate it bronze, but I typically will look at nechoshet, particularly in earlier literature. By this time, there was bronze. Remember, bronze is mixed, an alloy is mixed with brass to make bronze, but nechoshet, it's brass. But his likeness, his simile means, you look at these living beings, they're shiny, they sparkle, nechoshet. All right. Now, over these living beings that we just read about, over these, what you will see is the likeness of an expanse above this expanse. So it's like over the beings, there's an expanse, and then over the expanse, you have a voice that's heard. And what you see in simile is it's a likeness of a throne above the expanse. So you have these living beings, which I'm not going to name yet, but I know some of you couldn't wait because you had to spill the beans, but these living beings, then you have an expanse, then you have a throne, or the likeness of above, and you hear this voice. Now this throne has the likeness of a sapphire stone. Now this, on the sapphire throne is the likeness of a man. But it's a little bit different there as well. It's not like your normal man. This man has like fire enfolding from the loins up and the loins down. It's a fiery image on the throne. And then above this, you have what it appears to be a rainbow. Now, the movement of these living beings is interesting. It's connected with what are called wheels. Wheels. Seemingly, the wheels are guided by the Ruach, by the Spirit. Now, some might translate that wind, but here I think we're talking about Spirit, the Spirit. All right, so now the direction also seems to be taken from the Spirit. So wherever the Spirit wants to go, the wheels and hence the cherubim, the living beings go, everything moves together. When not moving, the wings go down. Collectively, all of the revelation that Ezekiel sees at the river Kabar, this fascinating description from Ezekiel 1, what he sees, he associates with the kavod Jehovah, the glory of the Lord. Now think about all those texts. Isaiah chapter 40, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh will see it together. This, according to Ezekiel, connects with that, meaning what all flesh will see together is this. What is this? And Ezekiel fell on his face. But what are the living beings? What are they called? For those of you who are paying attention, I made one slip and said the word once, but some of you probably have already told. Go now to Ezekiel chapter 10. Ezekiel chapter 10, another section I have to read in its fullness. Ezekiel 10, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, in the firmament that was above the head of the cherubim, there appeared over them something like a sapphire stone, like what appeared to be the shape of a throne. And he spoke to the man clothed in linen and said, Go in between the wheelwork, under the keruv. What's a keruv? And feel your hands, some translations might say cherub, and fill your hands with coals of fire from between the cherubim and scatter them over the city. And he went in my sight. Now the cherubim stood on the right side of the house when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. Then the glory of the Lord, the kavod Jehovah, went up from the cherub and stood above the threshold of the house. And the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of Jehovah's glory. And the sound of the wings of the cherubim was heard as far as the outer court, as the voice of the Almighty God when he speaks. And it came to pass, when he had commanded the man clothed with linen, saying, Take fire from between the wheelwork, and from between the cherubim. Then he went in and stood beside the wheel. And one cherub stretched out his hand from between the cherubim unto the fire that was between the cherubim, and took, by the way, imagine between these cherubim, there's fire, okay? So one of them reaches his hand into the fire in the midst of the cherubim, and took and put into the hands of him that was clothed in linen, who took it and went out. And the cherubim appeared to have the form of a man's hand under their wings. And when I looked, behold, the four wheels of by the cherubim, one wheel by one cherub, another wheel by another cherub. And the appearance of the wheels was like the color of an emerald stone. And as for their appearance, they four had one likeness, as if a wheel had been in the midst of a wheel. When they moved, they went towards their four sides. They turned not as they went, but to the place where the head turned, they followed it, and they turned not as they went. And their whole body and their backs and their hands and their wings and their wheels were full of eyes round about, even the wheels that had four each. As for the wheels, they are called in my hearing Hagalgal, the wheelwork. And every one had four faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, and the second face was the face of a man. The third face was the face of a lion. The fourth, the face of an eagle. And the cherubim mounted up. This is the same living creature, the chayot, that I saw by the river Kavar. And when the cherubim moved, the wheels moved by them. And when the cherubim lifted up their wings to mount up from the earth, the wheels also did not turn from beside them. And when they stood still, these stood still. And when they mounted up, these mounted also. For the spirit of the living creature was in them. Then the glory of the Lord departed from above the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. The cherubim lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight when they went out with the wheels beside them, and everyone stood at the door of the east gate of Jehovah's house. And the glory of the God of Israel was over them above. This is the living creature that I saw under the God of Israel by the river Kavar, and I knew that they were cherubim. Each one had 4 faces. Each one had 4 wings, and the likeness of the hands of man was under their wings. And as for the likeness of their faces, the faces were the same which I saw by the river Kavar. They were identical in their appearance. Each one went straight forward. Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 15 and 21, Ezekiel now realizes that what he saw that we read in chapter 1 is the same thing that he's describing here, except that in chapter 1 he called them chayot and chayot only, the living beings. Here he says, I knew it. These are cherubim. They're cherubs. They're cherubim. He said it's the same thing, chapter 10, verse 15 and 21. Now, he calls these cherubim, these chayot, cherubim. Now look, there is a throne. Now we're going to kind of work from top down in Ezekiel 10. Above the throne is the voice, the expanse, right? Then you have the throne. Then you have the cherubim under the throne, okay? And then under the cherubim is this wheelwork, it's called. And in Hebrew, it's called Hagalgal. Hagalgal. You've heard of Gilgal in the Bible, like a circle. This is what it means. It's a wheel. Now, I tend to think it's more dimensional than just like a wheel, a tire on your car. I think it's more of a sphere, but that's okay. We'll get to that. Okay. Between the wheels and the cherubim, there seems to be a wheel and a cherubim associated, a cherub and a wheel, cherub and a wheel, cherub and a wheel, cherub and a wheel. And between them, in the midst of that, is a fire enfolding. Takes direction when the heads turn. So whenever Ezekiel sees this, if he sees it go this way, all the heads go that way. It follows just like that. Being guided, it appears, by the Spirit. The whole body, get this, the back, the hands, the wings, the wheels, everything is full of eyes. Now, Ezekiel said, look, it's exactly like I saw in Ezekiel chapter 1. Well, he didn't say that, I'm saying that. But he's saying it's just like the vision at the river Kavar. But is it? But is it? Remember when I told you to write those 4 things down? You should have ox, man, or man, lion, ox, and eagle, right? In chapter 10, you have Keruv, the face of Keruv. You have lion, you have ox, and you have eagle. That means you have lion, ox, and eagle in chapter 10 match chapter 1. But in chapter 10 it says one of the 4 faces was a Keruv. Doesn't say man. So what that could mean is that a face of a Keruv, in his mind, he sees he's already said it was the face of a man. Now he says it's the face of a Keruv, meaning that one of the faces appears to be like a human. You follow? So what we have there is, thanks to our skill in our know-how of doing horizontal reading, people read Ezekiel chapter 1, then they read Ezekiel chapter 10. How many people actually say I'm going to write down every detail of every description and then go look at it in the next passage and make comparisons and contrasts. That's the way you look at stuff. That's the way you study. These living beings are called cheruvim. That's the plural. Singular is keruv. The word is not so easy to define. Not so easy to define, meaning that if you look in a concordance or a lexicon and you study it out and you say, what does the root word mean? You'll get all sorts of things from the ancient Near East, from the languages like Akkadian, these dead languages even, that were written in, the similar languages, maybe different scripts, but cuneiform, and we have this word. We have it in all different, but what does it mean? Well, most often, the word keruv or cheruvim, or its equivalent in one of these other Near Eastern languages, ancient Near East languages, appears to be associated with closeness and even protection of the holy. Let me give you an example. Go with me to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 24. So he drove out the man, and he placed the cheruvim at the east of the Garden of Eden and the bright blade of a revolving sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Now, a lot of the books I remember as a kid, I've loved the Bible for as long as I remember, and I remember pictures in Sunday school material or Bible books or whatever, children's books, and it would show this angel, usually a female angel, with a sword and a long white robe. It's glistening, it's kind of shiny, and she's got beautiful blonde hair and all that kind of stuff. And there's one guarding the entrance to the Garden of Eden. Or to show her with the sword raised up, she's chasing out Adam and Eve with their clothes on, now that they're clothed. But here's the deal. It doesn't say a keruv was guarding. It says the cheruvim are guarding the way to the holy. Now, it's interesting that they're guarding the way to the tree of life. Now, in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 18, wisdom is associated with the tree of life. And in later Jewish tradition, wisdom became synonymous with the Torah. So people would read in the Torah service Proverbs 3:18 because they associate the Torah with wisdom, which is the tree of life. So think about this. We have these cheruvim who are guarding the way to the Torah, basically, is the way the traditional view is. Well, I'm not going to dismiss that. Hold on to that thought. Now, we have, but the idea is that from the beginning of the narrative of what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start to call Levitical literature, priestly literature, some people call it, you get this idea that there is an association between the cherubim, the cheruvim, and guarding the way to the holy. So that you find them in the garden. Now go with me to Ezekiel again. Ezekiel 28, and I just want to read a couple of verses here. In 28, beginning in verse 12, moreover, the word of Jehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre, I think English has, and say to him, thus says the Lord God, you are a seal and a paragon, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You've been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, the ruby, the chrysolite, the diamond, the emerald, the shocham, the jade, the sapphire, the turquoise, the beryl, the gold. The workmanship of thy settings and thy sockets was in you in the day that you were created. They were prepared. You wast the far covering cherub, and I have set you so. You were on the mountain of God. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created, till iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and you have sinned. Therefore I have cast you as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy you, O covering cherub. Interesting that he's called a covering cherub. What in the world could that mean? From the midst of the stones of the fire. Your heart's been lifted up because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness, and I've cast you to the ground. I've laid you before kings that they may gaze upon you. You've defiled the sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your traffic. Therefore have I brought forth a fire from the midst of you. It has devoured thee, and I have turned thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. And they that know you among the people shall be appalled at you. You are become a terror, and you shall exist no more forever. Now, when I was a kid, I was told that this passage, as well as Isaiah 14, was talking about Satan, the devil. He was the most beautiful angel. And he had in his pipes, you know, like he could sing. You ever hear somebody say, man, that guy's got some pipes, meaning he can really sing. So I was told that he was the leader of the choir. And he, you know, but he got a little haughty, you know, he's handsome. He sees himself in the reflection of the water in the garden, and he says, you know, I'm thinking he takes a third of the angels with him, and he gets thrown out of heaven, and anyway, you remember that too, some of you, so don't act like I'm the only one. Neither Isaiah 14 nor Ezekiel 28 is talking about the devil or Satan or Lucifer. In fact, that's a whole nother class, and I might do that one day. But the idea that I want to give you is that we have this idea of an anointed cherub, a covering keruv, who's in this garden of God. What does that mean? This is very symbolic. I have an idea that I've never read anyone else talking about as to what this means, but that is not my class today, so you'll have to keep listening until I decide to do that one. I want to remind you at this point that the Mikdash, the Mishkan, and the later temple are all based upon and built according to what in Hebrew is called a tavnit, a pattern. A tavnit. Remember, the root word is bana, which means to build. So I've described it as a blueprint or a building plan. It doesn't have to be a sheet of paper. It could be, you know, this visualization that's three-dimensional, whatever. But it's whatever is shown to Moses in the mount, he makes things according to what he sees in the mountain. Look with me. Let me look at my time. Look with me at Exodus 25. Exodus 25 and verse 9. I'll just give you a couple of these quickly. 25 verse 9. According to all that I show you, the pattern, the tavnit of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and the pattern of all its vessels, even so shall you make it. In other words, don't deviate from what I've shown you already. You saw it. Make it like that. Okay? One other verse. Look at chapter 25, verse 40 of Exodus. Same thing, just so you have these in your notes. And look that you make them after their pattern, the tavnit, which was shown to you in the mountain. Everything, ladies and gentlemen, that is made in the Mishkan, according to Levitical literature, according to priestly sources, the reason things have a certain appearance is because they are made according to the tavnit, the building plan that was shown to Moses in the mountain. Now, these cheruvim, remember the description that we read in Ezekiel chapter 1, Ezekiel chapter 10. This is not the way most drawings depict these. You know, if you look up, you can do a lot of research, and some people propose that these cheruvim look like the Sphinx, that you're familiar with. That's a form of a keruv from the ancient world, and perhaps, right? But the idea is that Ezekiel tells us what they look like, and he tells us, you know, He describes them. So the cherubim are present in holy places, in tent shrines, in temples. Let me show you how prevalent the design or the incorporation of the cherubim theme. Well, that'd be a good name for a class or something, a cherubim theme. You know, what are you making here, Moses? Well, I'm kind of going with a cherubim theme. And this is what I'm doing. Look at Exodus chapter 26. Exodus 26, verse 1. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen and blue and purple and scarlet. With cherubim of artistic work you shall make them. So these curtains, guess what's embroidered on these? Well, cherubim. Now look at verse 31 of 26. And I have tons of verses. I can't hit them all, possibly. And you shall make a veil, verse 31, 26, chapter 26, 31. You shall make a veil of blue, purple, scarlet, fine, twined linen, with cherubim shall it be made of artistic work. And you shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of shittim wood, overlaid with gold, and so forth, and so on. Now, by the way, I'll just give you these verses. The curtains, the veil, look at, in your own time, Exodus 36:8 and 36:35. Remember, in the construction of the plan and then the execution of the building of the Mishkan, there's a lot of repetition. So the point being, so far we've got the cherubim theme in the curtains and in the veil. Now look, it carries over into the temple as well. Go with me to 1 Kings. 1 Kings. Chapter 6, 1 Kings chapter 6, and verse 29. And he carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubim, and palm trees and open flowers, both of the inner and outer areas. So these are the walls of the temple. Now look down at verse 32. This is what we're talking about here, is the doors to the inner sanctuary. The 2 doors also were of olive wood, and he carved upon them carvings of cherubim and palm trees and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold, etc., etc. Now let's keep reading. And spread the gold upon the cherubim and upon the palm trees. So also made he for the door of the temple post of olive wood in shape 4-sided. And the 2 doors were of cypress wood. The one door had 2 folding leaves, and the other door had 2 folding leaves. And he carved on them, guess what? Cherubim and palm trees and open flowers. And he covered them with gold, fitted upon the carved work. Now, let's go back up to verse 23. Now we're talking about the Sanctum Sanctorum, the Holy of Holies, the Kadosh HaKadoshim. Verse 23 of 1 Kings 6. And within the sanctuary, he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. And 5 cubits was the one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the other wing of the cherub. From the uttermost part of the one wing to the uttermost part of the other were 10 cubits. Now remember, if a cubit is about 18 inches, you can start doing the math. These are big cherubs. And the other cherub was 10 cubits. Both the cherubim were of one measure and one form. The height of one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was that of the other cherub. And he set the cherubim within the inner house, and the wings of the cherubim were spread out, so that the wing of the one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall. And the wings which were stretched towards the midst of the house touched one another. Right? So you got wall. This one's touching wingtip, this one's touching wall. The other one, same thing. Wing to wing, wall to wall. All right. And he overlaid the cherubim with gold, and he carved all the walls of the house round about. We read that already. Now, there's also, this isn't all, there's more cherubim. Go to 1 Kings 7 and 27. And he made 10 bases of brass, 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits its breadth, and 3 cubits the height of it. And the work of the bases was of this manner. They had borders, and the borders were between the ledges, and on the borders that were between the ledges were, ready? Lions, oxen, cherubim, and upon the ledge was a base above, and beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. And every base had 4 wheels of brass, and plates of brass, and the 4 corners thereof had shoulders under the laver, and shoulders were cast on at the side of one, the wreaths. And the mouth of it with the capital above was a cubit, and the mouth was found the work of the base 1.5 cubits, and also upon the mouth of it were engravings with their borders, 4 square, and the borders were 4 wheels, and the axles of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of a wheel was 1.5 cubits, a cubit, and the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Is he making something that looks like a chariot? What's he trying to do here? By the way, this isn't in the tabernacle as far as we know, according to this description. Their axles, their rims, their hoops, their hubs were all molten. And there were 4 shoulders to the 4 corners of one base, and the shoulders were of the very base itself. And in the top of the base was there a round compass of 0.5 cubit high, and on top of the base it stays, and its borders were of one piece with it. For on the plates, on its stays, and on the borders, he engraved cherubim, lions, palm trees, according to the space between each one, and the wreaths were round about. After this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them were of the same casting, the same measure, and the same shape. 4 sides, lions, oxen, cherubim. And it says, and wheels, ophanim. What is an ophanim? Well, let me tell you something interesting. Ophanim is not in the Pentateuch. Ophanim is not describing anything that is in the tabernacle, contrary to what some Bible dictionaries will tell you. Ophanim, the wheels, are only found here that I just read, describing the base of these 10 vases, or what does it call them in the English? 10 bases of brass. I would say nechoshet, it's brass. So he's got 10 bases of brass, and the base of which is wheels, and it's like chariot. Somehow it looks like a chariot. And it's here, wheels, chariot, wheels. And then the only other place that we find this discussion of ophanim is in the vision of Ezekiel. Ezekiel sees something that's very strange as we read it, and yet it's magnificent and awesome and awe-inspiring. It's a vehicle of some sort. And there's a throne, and there's someone on the throne, and there are cherubim, and there's fire enfolding, and wheels within wheels. Sounds like at the building of the Beit HaMikdash, they're trying to bring this together, these themes. By the way, Ezekiel 1, Ezekiel 10 mention ophanim, and I said that's the only other place technically. Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 13, and Ezekiel 11, verse 22 also mention ophanim, but it has to do with the same vision that he saw at the river Kavar and so forth. Now, with all the work completed, go with me to 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 6. 1 Kings 8, 6. And I'm going to read 6 through 10. And the priest brought in the chest of the covenant of the Lord to its place, into the sanctuary of the house, to the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubim. So now, you get this thing, it's being brought in. Remember the 2 big cherubs that I described? Their wingspan is wall to wing to wall. Under the wings of the cherubim, for the cherubim spread out their 2 wings over the place of the chest, and the cherubim covered the chest and its poles above. And they drew out the poles so that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place before the sanctuary, though they were not seen outside, and they are there to this day. There was nothing in the chest save the 2 tablets of stone which Moses put there at Horeb when Jehovah made a covenant with the children of Israel and when they came out of the land of Egypt. And it came to pass when the priests were come out of the holy place that the cloud filled the house of Jehovah, so that the priest could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of Jehovah had filled the house of Jehovah. The glory of Jehovah, cherubim, a throne. You see how things are coming together. Go with me to 1 Chronicles, please. 1 Chronicles. I'm kind of going fast here because I know I have a lot. 1 Kings 28, verse 18. And the gold for the tavnit, the pattern of the Merkavah, the chariot. What is this? And gold for the pattern of the chariot, that is the cherubim. Man, I love this. That spread out their wings and cover the ark or the chest of the covenant of Jehovah. All this, said he, is put in writing by the hand of Jehovah, who instructed me all the works of this tavnit. Now, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I had people challenge the idea. But this tavnit that David gives to Solomon to build the things that he had a desire to build, this is in the tavnit, which he says is from the hand of Jehovah. Interestingly enough, there's not much in the Bible that says it's from the hand of Jehovah. But he has this plan, a pattern, a blueprint. I believe it's not just a piece of paper, but that's just my slight bit of mystical leaning I have sometimes. But he gives this to David, and in that plan, it says, here's the plan of what is called a chariot. Very interesting. Let me look at something quickly. And the Merkavah, I wanted to make sure it said Merkavah. In my mind, I knew it did, and it does. The chariot, okay? So here's a chariot. We have wheels, Ophanim, only described in the chariot that is seen in Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10. By the way, that's what Ezekiel sees. He sees a chariot. A Merkavah. The root word there is to ride upon. Something that is being made in these holy places must be made according to what? The tavnit. And the center of it all, surrounded by the wings of 4 cherubim, is a chest. A chest within which is another chest, within which are the 2 tablets. Now, some might say, no, it says in 1 Kings 8 and 2 Chronicles 5 that the only thing in the chest was the 2 tablets made of stone. Well, let me help you understand my view. Without going into too much detail, I did that last week. Moses says he made a chest of shittim wood and he put the tablets in it, Deuteronomy chapter 10. In Exodus chapter 37, and elsewhere, but 37, Bezalel, a spirit-filled artisan, makes a chest. Now the question is, which chest do the tablets go in? Well, if you read Deuteronomy, it says that Moses made a chest and the tablets went in it. If you don't accept that view, you have to discount Deuteronomy 10, and you say, I side with Exodus. If you accept Exodus and you reject Deuteronomy 10 and you say, no, Bezalel made it, then you have to reject one and keep the other. In my view, you can have both. I'll let you keep both. You got the tablets in a box for the tablets. That's simple. The tablets containing the covenant, if you read Deuteronomy, the testimony, if you read Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. Deuteronomy never refers to the tablets as a testimony. But be that as it may, tablet, testimony, covenant, that's what goes into this box, which is surrounded by 4 cherubim. 4. Now, by the way, these tablets are called in Exodus 32:16 the Maaseh Elohim, the work of God. They are also referred to as the Miktav Elohim, the writing of God, engraved on 2 tablets. Now, this chest comes to be associated with the throne of God. Go with me, 1 Samuel chapter 4. 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 4. 1 Samuel 4:4. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from there the chest of the covenant of Jehovah of hosts, who sits upon the cherubim. You see this image that Jehovah is sitting upon the cherubim. Now, someone last week said, I gave 2 different options on which way the poles were, and somebody didn't like the way I described it, and they said, well, if you go with what Ross is saying, you have Jehovah riding side saddle. He's not on there. It's what people begin to think. I'll tell you, I'll show you. It's not really, he's not seated on the throne invisibly. It's an image. We're talking about something that was built based on something that was seen in the mountain. This is a representative, a visualization. People began to associate the box with the throne of God, but he's not really seated on there. Relax. Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse 2. 6:2. And gathered together all the chosen men of Israel. Well, verse 1. And David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. And David rose and went with all the people there that were with him from Baal Yehudah to bring up there the chest of God, whose name is called by the name of Jehovah of hosts, who dwells upon or sits upon the cherubim. And they set the chest on a box, etc. Now go with me to 2 Kings. 2 Kings. You have to forgive me for flipping back and forth. You don't have to, but I just have a lot to cover. 2 Kings 19. 2 Kings 19 and verse 15. 19:15. And Hizkiyahu prayed before Jehovah and said, Jehovah, Elohei Israel, Jehovah, the God of Israel, who sits on the cherubim. You are the God, even you alone, all the kingdoms of the earth. You made the heaven and the earth. Okay, this is also quoted in Isaiah 37:16. Hezekiah, from the king throughout the rank and file of the people, believed and associated this box with the throne of God. Or do they? Or do they? Are they talking about the one who sits on the thing that's made according to the Tavnit? Or do they just know he is seated on a throne above the cherubim? Well, Psalm 80, verse 2. You just put these in your notes. Psalm 99, verse 1. Each of these refer to the one who sits upon the cherubim. The cherubim that are on the box are the cherubim that are seen in the vision of Ezekiel. Is that what Moshe saw? That he saw the Tavnit, he saw the glory of the Lord revealed, the revelation of God, and he said, okay, I'm going to need to make these things to represent that which I saw. They are not the thing, they are representative visualizations of what he saw in the mountain. God rides not on the box that's this big by this big with poles and carried on the shoulder. All of that is a picture. Go with me to Psalm 18. Psalm 18. Psalm 18 and verse, I think it's 11. And he rode upon a cherub and did fly. He soared on the wings of the wind. Actually, he flew, is flying. His moving about is described as riding on cherubim, and the wings of not the wind, but the wings of the Spirit. Wherever the Spirit directs this Merkava, the chariot upon which Jehovah rides. See, this is Levitical literature. The priests are describing to us their view of how God moves about. And by the way, in your own time, read Psalm 68. Psalm 68. It's too long. I can't just read a part of it, so I took it out of my notes because I have other things to cover. So the chest is a visualization of the throne as is depicted in Levitical literature. Likely from those who knew best. You follow that? Because the Levites are the guardians of the chest of the testimony, and a certain group is described as the guardians of the most holy things. Whose job is it anyway to care for the holiest things? Now, we're going to get into dissecting a lot of stuff in this Levitical literature because there seems to be some polemical things that enter the text, where it becomes confusing. Just being straight with you. Not everybody's going to be honest with you. But there seems to be, within the Levites, a little bit of internal strife. We know that even from the text. You see where certain ones want the priesthood, and no, the priesthood is ours. And, well, whose job, I want to know this, whose job is it to care for and carry the chest of the testimony? Go with me to Numbers chapter 3. Numbers chapter 3 and verse 17. I'm going to go through a few verses quickly, just so you have them in your notes. Numbers 3:17, just to get us started off. These were the sons of Levi by their names: Gershon, Kahat, and Merari. Now skip down to verse 27. And of Kahat was the family of the Amrami, and the family of the Yitzhari, and the family of the Hevroni, and the family of the Uzzieli. These are the families of the Kohathites. All right? Now, these names are a little bit different in this translation. The families of the sons of Kahat shall pitch on the side of the tabernacle southward. And the chief of the house of the fathers of the family of the Kahati shall be Elizaphan, the son of Uzziel, and their charge. Here's what the Kohathites are going to take care of. Will be the chest, the ark, the table, the candlestick, the altars, the vessels of the sanctuary with which they minister, and the screen and its service. So we're talking about the Holy of Holies. Whose job is that? Not just anybody can do this. It's got to be the Kohathites. Look at Numbers chapter 4, verse 1. And Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, take the sum of the sons of Kohat from among the sons of Levi, after their families, by the house of their fathers, from 30 years old and upward until 50 years old, all that enter into the host to do the work in the tent of meeting. This shall be the service of the sons of Kahat in the tent of meeting, namely the most holy things. Okay? So only they can carry the ark. Go with me to Numbers chapter 10. Numbers chapter 10. And it says in verse 11, in verse 11. And it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year that the cloud was taken up off the tabernacle of the testimony. All right, so this is the first move of the chest since it's been made. And this is instructive. Look at verse 21. And the Kohathites set forward bearing the sanctuary that they might set up the tabernacle against their arrival. In other words, you want them in the lead so that when they get to the next stop, remember they're following the cloud and pillar. Cloud and pillar moves, they move, just like the Spirit. Think about it. Just like the Spirit of the living things. You know, when it moves, you move. When it stops, the wings go down. Now the idea is that Kohath has to get there. It's like you don't want them behind 603,550 males plus women, children, animals, all that stuff. You got to have them up front because you need to set this tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed, up. Look at verse 33, chapter 10, 33. And they departed from the mountain of Jehovah 3 days' journey, and the chest of the covenant of Jehovah went before them in the 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. So they're ahead, and notice how in the Levitical literature, the ark, the chest, starts to take on this idea that it's very intimately connected to God, right? Going to search out a place for them to rest. Now look at verse 35. Now, by the way, chapter 10, verse 35 and 36 of Numbers are set off by white spaces. And it came to pass when the ark set forward that Moses said, "Rise up, Jehovah, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you." Then they would move. Kohath in the lead, with the ark being borne on the shoulders of them and them alone. Rise up, Jehovah. So, rise up, Jehovah, and then it's not like Jehovah's really on it, but you get the image. All the people every one of the Israelites see that, and they, oh look, Jehovah's risen. And then it moves. Then, when it rested, I want you to think about something. Every time that ark stops moving, when the chest stops, it's called resting. And the ark, and when it rested, he said, "Return, Jehovah, to the 10,000 thousands of Israel." Now, there's something interesting about this. Not only are those two verses set off by white spaces, right? But they're in the Hebrew text. There are an inverted nun at the beginning and end. The Hebrew letter nun, it's backwards, inverted. And so there are several cases, I believe it's 9 in the Masoretic text, and the rabbis give a lot of different reasons as to what this means. One of the reasons that people say that you have inverted nuns is because this text is out of place in the Torah. It got put in the wrong place. It was a book unto itself, part of another scroll, another fragment that was inserted. So just look that up. In fact, I'll give you... I don't always use Wiki, but sometimes Wiki is a good place to start, gives you a lot of links. Go to Wikipedia. Not now. Wait till I'm finished. Go to Wikipedia and look up inverted nun. Inverted nun. N-U-N. Arise, Jehovah. Now, this box... This chest is borne on the shoulders of the guardians of the chest of the covenant. They and they alone. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 10. Deuteronomy 10 and verse 8. Deuteronomy 10:8. Therefore, let's go to 8. At that time, Jehovah separated the tribe of Levi, to bear the chest of the covenant of Jehovah, to stand before Jehovah, to minister to him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore, Levi has no part or inheritance with his brother, and Jehovah is his inheritance, according to Jehovah your God, as Jehovah your God promised him. Now, I'm going to be honest with you over the next, I'm always honest with you, but I want you to understand this, that there are going to be some challenging things in the classes ahead because we're going to read the text and allow the text to explain itself. And a lot of theological baggage is going to have to come off. We're going to talk about priestly Levitical literature. But I want you to notice that you'll see this when we get into this material, especially beginning next week. You're going to begin to see that there are people get confused. They think, well, the priest, the descendants of Aaron, they're in a higher class and the Levites are lower. Depends on what you read. So stay with me on that. Okay, now go with me to Deuteronomy 31. Deuteronomy 31 and verse 9. And Moses wrote this Torah and delivered it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who bore the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, and to all the elders of Israel. Go down to verse 24, Deuteronomy 31. And it came to pass when Moshe had made an end of writing the words of this Torah in a book, until they were finished. It's not this book, because this book still has 3 chapters left. It's another book he wrote. Until they were finished, Moses commanded the Levites who bore the chest of the covenant of Jehovah, saying, take this book of the Torah and put it mitzad, at the side of the chest of the covenant of Jehovah your God, that it may be there for a witness against you. So now the Levites who bore the ark, that's the Kohathites, they have another item that they're responsible for. It's the scroll that Moses wrote. By the way, this is the last reference to the chest of the covenant in the Pentateuch. Last time it's mentioned. But for more than 800 years, the chest of the covenant, the chest of the testimony, is an integral part of everything that happens with the children of Israel in their religious worldview. Now I'm going to go through very, very quickly. This is 800 years in a few minutes. Joshua chapter 3 and 4, the miraculous crossing of the children of Israel over the river Jordan into the land of promise. Remember that? The ark is a big part of that. Now, the ark is talked about, and those who bear the ark, and they're going to go in, and this is going to happen, and so forth. Now, this is a miracle. It's a miracle to show the people that God is going to perform miracles with Joshua like he did Moses. Now, some people say, well, that's not fair. He split the Gulf of Aqaba, and it was hundreds of meters high water on each side. Here it's just the River Jordan. That's not a, well, I've taught on that before. So anyway, I won't go into it today. But it's a comparable miracle. The crossing of the River Jordan is compared to the crossing of the Yam Suf, and it even says it's just like that, basically. All right, Joshua 6, we begin to get into the story of Jericho. 7 and 8, you have the Battle of Ai. And then in chapter 8, remember, the ark is involved in the story of the blessings and curses uttered on Gerizim and Ebal. Now, go with me to 1 Samuel chapter 3. The chest ends up at Shiloh, and it's there for 369 years. Now look at chapter 3, verse 1. And the child Samuel ministered to Jehovah before Eli, and the word of Jehovah was precious or rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. It came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, his eyes had begun to grow dim. He's going to sleep, see? That he could not see, he's blind, and the lamp of God had not gone out in the temple of Jehovah, where the ark was, and Samuel was laid down there to sleep. Samuel is in, sounds like he's in the Holy of Holies. Ark is right there. He hears a voice. Shmuel, Shmuel. Does it make sense that he would hear a voice in that room? Well, of course it does. Exodus chapter 25, verse 18 through 22 says that the box, the chest of the covenant, between the cherubim, that's where God's going to speak, from between the cherubim. He's in there. It's right there. He hears the voice. Well, that's where the voice is supposed to come from in Levitical literature. That's what the priest knows, see? Now look with me. I want to read you one that I think is fascinating. Numbers chapter 7. Numbers chapter 7, verse 89. And when Moses was gone into the tent of meeting to speak with him, then he heard the voice speaking to him from above the covering that was upon the chest of the testimony from between the two cherubim, and it spoke to him. So he hears the voice. He goes into the Holy of Holies, Numbers 7:89. Between the two cherubim above, that's where he hears the voice. Remember the vision of Ezekiel? Okay. Quickly running through 1 Samuel 4, 5, 6. Remember the Philistines capture the ark, the chest, and it's in the hands of the Philistines for 7 months. 1 Samuel chapter 6 tells us that. It possesses some sort of power that's manifested. Like you hear these stories associated with the chest where they put it in the temple of Dagon and the idol is face down before the box when the priests come in. Imagine that. It's like, we have to get this picked up before the people come, as you can imagine they would say. Plagues on those who took it. I think in the English and the King James it says they had hemorrhoids. That's some bad stuff. You want to get rid of this, whatever's causing this plague. So they send it back. Good riddance. They send it back. 1 Samuel 6:19, the men of Beit Shemesh. Remember this story? There are a lot of them get struck dead because they get nosy. They want to look inside the box. And it says, now this is a problem with the text here. I know some people don't like to hear that, but it is. It says that 50,000, whatever that means, 50,000 men are killed in Beit Shemesh. That's a lot of people in Beit Shemesh, dead. Did that many people try to look in? What's the story there? Well, Josephus tells us that the correct reading there is 70. 70 people died, 70. That 50,000 is a mistake. All right, so 1 Samuel chapter 7, the men of Kiryat Yearim take it to the house of Abinadab. Remember this? The chest stays at the house of Abinadab. His son Eleazar's in charge. Stays there for 20 years. Now in 1 Samuel 14, I'm sorry, let me skip that one. I'm going to cut down a little bit. I've got every reference. I'm not doing that. 2 Samuel 6, David plans to bring the box in. So look with me at 2 Samuel 6. 2 Samuel 6, and let's just read verse 1 through 3. Again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000, and David arose and went with all the people that were with him from Baale-Yehudah to bring up from there the chest of God, whose name is called by the name of Jehovah of hosts, who dwells upon the cherubim. And they set the chest of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, who was at Givah. And Uzzah and Achio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was at Givah, accompanying the chest of God. And Achio went before the ark. And David and all the house of Israel played before Jehovah on all manner of instruments made of cypress, wood, on lyres, lutes, timbrels, rattles, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nachshon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the chest of God and the ark, the box, and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it, and the anger of Jehovah burned against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, that he died before the chest of God. Now, David is really shaken by this. And he says, I can't, how can I? I can't continue with this mission. So the ark goes to Obed-Edom. When David later hears that Obed-Edom's house is blessed, he decides to give it another try. And then look at verse 13. And when they that bore the chest of Jehovah had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an oxen and a fatling. David dances. You remember all this story. Now go forward with me for time to 1 Chronicles 15 and verse 1. People might think I'm going a little bit long, but hey, I'm covering 800 years in an hour and a half. Where else can you get that? Verse 1, 1 Chronicles 15. David made houses for himself in the city, prepared a place for the chest of God, and pitched for it a tent. And David said, none ought to carry the chest of God but the Levites, for Jehovah has chosen them to carry the chest of God and to minister to him forever. This is the description of the Levites given according to Deuteronomy. That's the reason God put them in that position. Let's see. And then it says, and David gathered all Israel together at Jerusalem to bring up the chest of Jehovah to its place, and he prepared for it. And David assembled the children of Aaron and the Levites of the sons of Kohath, Uriel the chief, his brethren 120, and it goes on to describe that. Now look down at verse 11. And David called for Zadok and Abiathar the priest, and for the Levites, for Uriel, Asaiah, Yoel. Go through all of them. Verse 12, you are the chiefs of the fathers' houses of Levites. Sanctify yourselves, you and your brethren, that you may bring up the chest of Jehovah, God of Israel, to the place that I have prepared it. For because you did not do so at first, Jehovah our God made a breach upon us, because we did not seek him according to the prescribed form. He's referring back to, why did Uzzah get struck? So the priest and the Levites sanctified themselves to bring up the chest of Jehovah, God of Israel, and the children of the Levites bore the chest of God on their shoulders, the bars being upon them, as Moses had commanded according to the word of Jehovah, etc. So the idea is, we now know, this is why, I know you knew this, but this is why Uzzah got struck. They put it on a cart. It doesn't belong on a cart. You're not supposed to bring it on a cart. 2 Samuel chapter 7, David decides to build a house. 2 Samuel 15, Absalom's rebellion. Remember, in Absalom's rebellion, the chest is carried out of the city of David and out of Jerusalem and across the Kidron. And when they get almost through Kidron, David tells Abiathar and he tells the priest, bring it back. Zadok and Abiathar, bring it back. And then if God is gracious, things will work out later. Now, I'm going quickly because I have a couple more points. In 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 26 and 27, Solomon is going to banish one of these priests, Abiathar, because Abiathar he picked the wrong horse, as you might say. In the political discussion of the day, it was probably just as heated as the last election. You had to pick one, and Abiathar chose the wrong one, meaning he didn't choose Solomon. So he gets in trouble with Solomon, and Solomon tells him, the only reason I'm not going to kill you, by the way, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 26 and 27 is one of the most important points in understanding the priestly interfighting and so forth. But he says, you got to go. You carried the chest for my dad. It's the only reason I'm not going to kill you. So he banishes him to Anatot. Anatot is a Levitical town. And by the way, we know that as the town where Hilkiah and Jeremiah are from. Okay. Solomon builds the house for the name of God and dedicates it in chapter 8, and the chest is now resting. Remember I told you when the chest stops, it's called resting. And then there's silence. No mention of the chest for a long time. In 622 BCE, a discovery is made in the temple. The scroll of Moses has been found. 2 Kings 22, 23, 2 Chronicles 34, 35 tell the story. No mention of the ark. Now, a lot of people think, wrongly, that the ark was in the temple at that time. It just didn't get mentioned. Where else would it be? It wasn't. Not if you read the text. They do find a scroll. They do find the scroll of Moses. The ark's not there. It's not mentioned, and it's not there. It's not just that it's not mentioned. Who has it? Well, let me show you where it is mentioned again. Only, remember I tell you to read horizontally. So if I tell you that the story of the discovery and the great Passover is mentioned in 2 Kings, it's also mentioned in 2 Chronicles, you have to read them both because they're different. They're as different as two different opposing views on the newscast. One watches this brand, another watches another. Kings and Chronicles is just like that. But Chronicles tells us something that Kings doesn't. So go to 2 Chronicles, and here in 2 Chronicles 35, let's do verse 2. And he set the priests in their watches and encouraged them to the service of the house of Jehovah. And he said to the Levites who taught all Israel, who were holy to Jehovah, put the holy box in the house which Solomon the son of David, king of Israel, did build. You need no longer carry it upon your shoulders. You mean carry it upon their shoulders? I thought it was rested a long time ago. Obviously, it had been pulled out. It had been pulled out, likely by the guardians of the Levites. Probably, most likely removed by them during the reign of godless kings. And once the chest is, once it's returned, he said, you don't have to carry it anymore. So did the Kohathites have it out? Because you don't want Manasseh or some of these guys, they're already wicked as hell, so you don't want the ark to be abused or something to happen to it. So they take it out. Then Josiah is a godly king, and they say, well, let's go to this little thing he's putting on. He's rededicating the house, and who knows, we might even put the ark back in there. And he says, go put it, you don't have to carry it anymore. The year was 622. But then it disappears again. 23 years after the death of Josiah, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon destroys the temple. We have two accounts, and I'm almost finished. 2 Kings 25, verse 13 through 17, and Jeremiah 52, verse 17 through 23 describe that ultimate destruction. And it mentions stuff that's carried away, but the ark isn't mentioned. Now again, some people say, yeah, they got it. They got it. It's in the basement of the Vatican now, or whatever. But people come up with these ideas. It was there, it was stolen, it's just not mentioned. If it's not mentioned, it ain't there. Where is it? All right, a couple of quick quotes. This is in my book, but I'm quoting Richard Elliott Friedman. I just knew how to find it in my book better. For some reason, the biblical sources do not tell us what happened to the ark containing the tablets of the Ten Commandments. Archaeology, too, has shed no light on this at all. The disappearance of the ark is the first great mystery of the period. and it remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Bible. There's no report that the ark was carried away or destroyed or hidden. There's not even any comment such as, and then the ark disappeared and we don't know what happened to it, or, and no one knows where it is to this day. The most important object in the world in the biblical view simply ceases to be in the story. It was last mentioned in the Passover of 622. And the prophet Jeremiah, who was a prophet at that time, gives the final word on the ark. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 16. Jeremiah 3:16. And it shall come to pass, when you multiply and increase in the land in those days, says Jehovah, they shall no more say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, nor shall it come to mind, nor shall they remember it, nor shall they miss it, nor shall that be done any more. You won't miss it. You won't make another. It won't even come to mind. Rabbinic tradition says that Josiah hid it. If he did, it had to be between 622, when it was last seen, he told the Levites, put it back in the house, and 609 when he died. So if the rabbis are right, it disappears in that window, 622 to 609. My question is, what if Jeremiah had something to do with it? Now, there are plenty of theories, but this is the one I buy. And I'm quoting, it's from 2 Maccabees, but it's also in my book, and I know where to find it here because I don't have Maccabees in my Tanakh. One finds in the records, James Tabor brought this up in his class on the Ark not too long ago, or on the testimony. One finds in the records that the prophet Jeremiah ordered those who were being deported to take some of the fire, as has been mentioned, and that the prophet, after giving them the law, instructed those who were being deported not to forget the commandments of the Lord, or to be led astray in their thoughts on seeing the gold and silver statues and their adornment, and with other similar words he exhorted them that the law should not depart from their hearts. It was also in the same document that the prophet, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark should follow with him, and that he went out to the mountain where Moses had gone up and had seen the inheritance of God. Jeremiah came and found a cave dwelling, and he brought there the tent and the ark and the altar of incense, and he sealed up the entrance. Some of those who followed him came up, intending to mark the way, but couldn't find it. When Jeremiah learned of it, he rebuked them and declared, the place shall remain unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. Then the Lord will disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord and the cloud will appear, as they were shown in the case of Moses, and as Solomon asked that the place should be specially consecrated. Now, some might say, well, I don't believe in Maccabees. Okay, it's an interesting story. It's an ancient story. It says that Jeremiah, who was there at the time, took it. Which would mean that if that's true in Jeremiah 3, where it's sort of like, hey, out of sight, out of mind. Don't worry about the ark. One day you guys won't even think about it. But there, we are thinking about it. He's like, don't worry about it. Now, did he carry this by himself? He's in the right family. He could get, if it's the big box with the cherubim on the top, he could have got some of his family members to help him. Or did he just take a little box? And the tent, did he bring the whole tent? Like the whole tent, all the curtains with all this, and the poles and the loops and the hoops and the lampstand and the altar and it? Or is it that covered tent that was in the holy place, sometimes translated as veil? Plenty of theories about where the ark is. Some say that Solomon impregnated the queen of Sheba, and they had a kid named Menelik, and Menelik was sent to spend some time with daddy. And then on his way back to Ethiopia, he brought the ark there, and people swear up and down that that's where it is. Some people say that it was seen by a paratrooper who later became a great rabbi, and he saw it in the tunnels under the temple compound. Some people say it's here, some people say it's there. Here's what I want you to know. The chest of the testimony represented a part of what was seen on the mount by Moses, represented a part of the kavod Jehovah. It's a part of the component of the glory that was seen. Ezekiel saw that. What they saw was shown for the purpose of making a replica which visualizes, represents, pictures that which was seen at the river Kavar and that which was seen on the mountain. The chest of the testimony was to be cared for and carried by a specially selected group of Leviim, and we have a lot to cover in regards to Levites and Levitical literature, and we're going to do that starting next week. Leviticus, like you have likely never studied it before. Next week, we begin a 10-week series on the book of Vayikra, Leviticus. 10-week study that, by the way, is interrupted for 3 weeks. Why so? Because you have Pesach and unleavened bread according to the Jewish calendar, and we have our conference. But 10 weeks, and until then, don't you miss our study on Leviticus. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.